Good day, students. Today I want to talk to you about project scope planning. Now, as you can think, project scope planning is one of the most important parts of project management because that is where we decide what is included in the project and what is excluded in the project. And especially when we come to the work breakdown structure, it also tells us what all the activities are that we need to do in order to get the project done. So please pay attention because this is very important. Now, unfortunately, this week I'm a little bit late with my YouTube video, so you will have until Friday to do the online assignment. But if at all possible, please watch the video before class on Monday. Because on Monday in class what we are going to do is application. So you will be sitting in your groups and you will be drawing up your scope statement, drawing up your WBS. So I will do a quick recap in class, but I'm not going to go into the depths that I do in this presentation. Okay, so the first thing that you need to be able to do is to elicit project requirements, develop a project scope statement, and derive a project work breakdown structure. So those are the three outcomes of this specific theme. Okay, so why do we want a scope statement? And the basic reason is that before we start the project, we want to draw up a project plan, and the idea is that our project is then developed, or rather executed, according to the project plan. So the common elements that we normally have in a project plan are our scope statements, which we will be talking about in this lecture, the charter, which you guys are already busy with, and the statement of work. And we will talk today as well about what's the difference between a scope statement and a statement of work. Then we want our detailed requirements, which we will talk about in this lecture. Project organization and who is responsible for the tasks. That's the next theme, theme 4. Detailed work definition. So the work breakdown structure. Or you can also have a product breakdown structure, but in this course we focus on the work breakdown structure. And that is also in this lecture. Then the detailed schedule with milestones, which will come next. The project budget and cost accounts, which you will be talking about in project accounting. The quality plan, which you do in project quality. The risk plan, which is also part of project quality. The work review plan, which we will touch on later on in this module, where we talk about project control. The testing plan, which is not something that we really deal with in the BTEC in project management, but the testing plan is especially something which is important for engineering projects, and all engineers are taught how to test. The change control plan, which we will address to a certain extent. The documentation plan, which we also address to a certain extent. The procurement plan, and then which is addressed in project resources, and then also the implementation plan. Okay, so we said as the first item in the project plan we have scope, charter, and statement of work. So these are the first items that we have in the project master plan, and they are various themes, they are variations on the same theme. So the main purpose is to provide a broad description of the master plan or the project to the stakeholders, and it's directed at the core project team, the project organization, and the primary stakeholders. So maybe if I just go back, what is the difference between the charter and the scope statement and the statement of work? Alright, so the charter, as you've seen, is a high level summary of everything that is happening on the project. So we address cost, we address schedule, we address the basic approach that we are going to follow, we address the stakeholders, the objectives, etc., etc. But this is at a high level, and the main purpose of that is to give the project manager authority to start expending resources in the organization to do the project. So when we talk about the scope statement and the statement of work, this is where we now go into more depth in terms of exactly what it is that we're going to do in this project. Okay, so the scope statement describes the breadth of the project, so the areas to be covered by the project and the deliverables, and very, very importantly, the areas that are not covered. Very often we forget about that. We think that it's implied that anything that's not in the scope statement is not covered. But remember that if we don't put it in writing, the client might still have an expectation that those areas that are not covered will actually be done. So it includes the objectives of the project from the perspective of the contractor. So the contractor is basically the performing organization. The requirements, and that we will talk about in more detail in the slides that follow. The deliverables, so what are the interim, so at the end of each phase, and also the final deliverables that you get out of the project. So remember, when we spoke about the definition of a project, we said that it delivers a product or a service. So the deliverables here are what is that product or service that is delivered at the end of the day. Then the next thing is the milestones, because remember that we want to break our project down into certain key points, where at those certain key points we have certain deliverables that are completed and that are accepted. Because if you think about, for example, the project charter, it wouldn't make sense to generate the project charter and then do the scope statement and the work breakdown structure and the detailed planning, and at the end of that then ask the client to sign all of that off. Because if the client had seen the project charter, they might already have realized that we were on the wrong track. So milestones are there to make sure that we are still on the right track, and to give the clients and or the performing organization the chance to give an input as to where the project is going. And sometimes at milestones we actually even stop projects, because sometimes at a certain milestone we find out that either what we're trying to do with the project is impossible, or we find out that what we're trying to do with the project is no longer necessary. So that's why we have milestones. Alright, and then the last thing which is important and links to the areas not covered is the limits and exclusions. So what does the project not include? And this is important because these are the things that cost you money at the end of the day if you do not stipulate them. So say I'm building a road that runs from TUT to town. Okay, so this is now a new road. It's going to be a 4-lane road, and it's a completely new road that runs from TUT to Paul Kruger Square. All right, now what do I put under limitations? One of the things I might want to put under limitations is the fact that I will not be supplying lighting. So I will not be supplying lighting poles and lighting for this road. So you can see that if I do not explicitly exclude it, It might be that the client says, yes, but any road that you build, you should provide lighting. And so that is one of those implicit things that happens when you build a road. So it's important that I explicitly write that out. Or, for example, if I say I'm building this road and I will include lighting, the client can then turn around if I don't limit how my lighting will be implemented, and can turn around and say, okay, you said that you were including lighting, so we want a light every 10 meters. Whereas at the back of my mind, and when I thought about it, I was actually thinking, okay, I'm going to put a light every 100 meters. So you can see that having to put a light every 10 meters is going to cost me a lot more than putting a light every 100 meters. So I have to limit what I'm going to do in the scope, and I have to be explicit, and I have to say I will put a light every 100 meters. Okay, so I hope that makes the point now in terms of how important it is to stipulate what the project does not include. Okay, then requirements. Requirements are, I find, things that students battle with, because requirements are things that the project management team must identify both with the internal and the external stakeholders in order to determine what the requirements are and the expectations of all the parties involved. So if I go to my favorite bugbear, as you know, which is the ETOL roads, the Sunroll never sat down properly with one of the stakeholders of the roads, which was the road users, and asked them what their expectations of the roads would be. So they assumed that we have the expectation that we would be able to get to work quicker and all of that, but they never asked us what our expectation would be on how much we would be able to or be prepared to pay for this road. So you can see that it's important to understand the expectations of all the parties involved. So if you look at your career day stall, you probably don't have access to the specific students and the specific schools that we will be doing the career day at, because they are in Soweto. But what you could do is you could speak to children in your community who are grade 8 to 12, and you could ask them what would they typically expect from a career day. And you could also speak to teachers, and you could say to them what typically would they expect from a career day. So obviously when we do a project, it's better to speak to the specific community, but sometimes we don't have the luxury of doing that. So sometimes we speak to similar people to find out what their expectations are. So, oopsie, let me just tell this computer it must not restart now. Okay, so remember that a requirement is always linked to a stakeholder. And sometimes students misunderstand requirements, because for the career day stall, you might say to me, a requirement for the stall to be successful is a table. No, that's not a requirement. That is equipment that you need. All right. Or you might say to me, a requirement is that I need a car to be able to drive to the career day. No, that is not a requirement. That is transport that you need. So remember, requirements are basically the expectations and what the stakeholders want out of the project. Okay, so here is out of the PMBOK, the collect requirements process. So as inputs, you can see you need your project charter and you need your stakeholder register. And the outputs are then your requirement documentation, your requirements management plan, and your requirements traceability matrix. Okay, so let's just talk about all of these. Your requirements management plan, mainly what you do there is you prioritize your requirements. So I like to use an example of a cell phone, because today with smartphones can really do a lot of stuff for us. And so when we talk about the requirements of a phone, your normal run-of-the-mill person will say, okay, what I want from the phone is I want to be able to receive and make calls. And that was the original requirement that we all had of our phones. Then with technology becoming more compact and becoming cheaper and easier to implement and so on and so forth, we now have phones that can take photographs. We have phones that can manage our diaries. We can read our email on our phones. We can send SMSs. We can WhatsApp. We can even download apps where we can measure our running and our exercising, etc., etc. All right. Now, if we're talking about making a low-cost phone that's going to cost $100. All right, we can then make a list in the requirements document of all these requirements that I've just mentioned. But at the end of the day, we only have we will only get $100 for each phone that we sell. That means that we have to prioritize the requirements. And so probably the most important requirement is that we need to be able to send and receive calls, or make and receive calls. And so if our user is only looking for that, and they can get it at a cheap cost of $100, they will probably buy our phone. And so you then see that the design team will, after having the discussions with the stakeholders, will then sit down and will then prioritize which requirements are the most important. Because if you ask me what my requirements of a phone are, I would like a phone that will start my coffee machine. Because to me, my coffee first thing in the morning is very important. So if I had an app on my phone that I could just press a button and then the coffee is there in the morning, then I will be a happy person. But you can see that for that R100 phone, my requirement will be at the lowest level of priorities. All right. Now, also remember, when you start talking about requirements in your groups on Monday and on Friday, that I am also one of your stakeholders. And so one of the things that you should probably do is you should also ask me what my requirements are in terms of your career day projects. Okay, so the tools and techniques, here you can see we have the inputs again and the outputs as we had on the previous slides. But the tools and techniques that we use are interviews, focus groups, facilitated workshops, group creativity techniques, group decision-making techniques, questionnaires and surveys, observations, and prototypes. So sometimes in order to understand better whether what the product of our project is going to deliver is going to meet the requirements of the client, it makes sense to build a prototype. So if we think back of our cell phone, if you build a prototype that isn't working yet, so you can't send and receive calls yet, but as a user, I can look at it and I can see where the buttons are, and I can see where the call button is, and where I switch it on and where I switch it off, etc., etc. And you show that to me, or you maybe show that to a focus group, you can collect information as to what the requirements are. Alright, so I hope that you now understand that requirements are linked to stakeholders, and requirements are linked to what your stakeholder wants from the product or service. And it is not the equipment that you need, it is not the components that you need, it is not the things that you need to make the project happen. It is rather what the expectations are of your client at the end of the day. Okay, so when we talk about scope and the scope statements, it's sometimes confusing because some people talk about a statement of work or an SOW, and other people talk about a scope statement. Now, the reason why there are two different words that we use is that in a lot of environments, the project team will not start from scratch and write the scope statement like you guys are doing for your career day project. What will happen is that there will be a request for proposal or a contract or a master plan which is given to you by the client, and so for a contracted project, that statement of work is already included in those documents. So for a statement of work, basically it's for contracted projects, and it is something which is agreed between the contractor and the customer, and it defines the work required, the work proposed, the basis of cost, schedules, and related matters. And there are two statements of work. So there is the statement of work in the master plan, which is the master plan of the client, and then there is the statement of work in the contract. So this is the part of the work that the contractor is going to do. So think, for example, if we are building an aeroplane and the customer is in charge of the aeroplane system. The contractor is in charge of building the engine for the aeroplane system. So the statement of work in the master plan will be very, very extensive because it will include and describe all the work that has to be done to build the aircraft system. Whereas the statement of work in the contract will be limited to the work that needs to be done on the engine. So the statement of work in the contractor's project plan must contain the same information and requirements as stated in the contract statement of work. Because it happens that we look at the contract statement of work and we say, all right, this isn't detailed enough for what we want to do, so we want to rewrite that, but we need to make sure that the two speak to each other and that we include everything that is a requirement in the contract statement of work in our statement of work that we're working on. So the contractor's statement of work and the contract statement of work may be worded differently, but both should have the exact same interpretation in terms of the work and the end results. Okay, so to recap, there's the statement of work master plan, which is for the aircraft, the high-level aircraft system scope of work. Then the contractor is building the engine, so the contractor will then be given a contract statement of work which will describe at a high level what the engine is supposed to do. The contractor will then take the contract statement of work and will then rewrite it into more detail so that the project team understands it better. And it might then include more milestones and more detail than the contract statement of work, but it will not say anything which contradicts the contract statement of work. All right, so I hope that clears up the difference between these different statements of work that we talk about. All right, and this question we'll look at in class when we go through this in class. Okay, so then how do we define the statement of work or the scope statement? So the first thing is that our statement of work and our work breakdown structure must correspond to each other. Both must be clear, and neither the contractor nor the customer must question what has to be done. So you must use language that is clear enough that it is not open for interpretation. So if you say it's going to be blue, that's open for interpretation, because I might say, okay, it must be light blue, and you might say, no, it must be navy blue. So you can see blue is open for interpretation. So in a statement of work, we want to say it must be navy blue, because then that is clear to everybody involved. Okay, and then the requirements for every end item, task and report must be clear enough so parties responsible will be able to sign off acceptance of results. So it must be described to such a level of detail that if we say it is navy blue, there is actually a paint number, for example, that goes with that description of navy blue, and I can then compare that paint number description to the color of what you are delivering, and I can then say, yes, it is the right color, navy blue. Then the next thing is, in a statement of work, never specify tasks using as necessary or as required. Because from the point of view of the contractor, it will never be necessary or required, because anything that's necessary or required is going to cost me money. So when I do my costing, I'm going to ignore things like that. But in terms of the client, it will also always be necessary and it will always be required. Okay, so where judgments must be made, specify who will make them and procedures for making them, and the potential impact of judgments on cost and schedule escalation. Okay, so if we go back to our example of the lighting on the roads, on that road that we're building from TUT to Kruger Square. If we say that lighting will be supplied as required, I might, as the contractor, say, okay, that means every 100 meters, whereas the client will say every 10 meters. So we need to have a procedure which then says, okay, each part of the road must be illuminated by a specific number of lumens, which is the unit in which we measure light. So that is then a clear indication, and we can also then say that that we will get a lighting engineer in to come and measure the number of lumens. And we can also say that at the moment we are budgeting for a lamppost every 100 meters, but if the lumens are not as specified, we might need to add more lampposts, but that will mean that there will be a cost and schedule escalation, which will be for the cost of the client. So do you see that then we will have to have a CVO, and the client will then have to pay for that extra lampposts. But then it's clear from the beginning what is the procedure for deciding who is responsible for making the judgment, and who is responsible for carrying the cost and schedule escalation implication. Okay, then another thing about statement of work is that we must specify requirements using active terminology. So you have to use shall and will. And you should never use passive terminology like should or try to, because should or try to goes back to this what we have over here, as necessary, as required. That's the same type of terminology that we are using. So we always use shall or will, and there is a difference in technical speak or in contract speak when we use shall and when we use will. When we use shall, what we are saying is that it must do that. Okay? So in terms of your career day stall, I will say that the students shall arrive at 8 o'clock. That means you must arrive at 8 o'clock. Okay? But then in terms of something that is desirable, I will say will. So I can say students will have professionally made banners for the Career Day Expo. So then you can see that it's desirable to do that. You don't have to do that. But if you do that, then you are meeting my requirements in a more comprehensive way. But so you can see that in contracts, you need to read them carefully, and you need to make sure that everything that says shall actually happens, and everything that says will, you try to achieve. But if there is a trade-off between doing something that is shall and something that is will, you always have to do the things that are shall, because those are the things that you must do. Okay, so what we do when we define the statement of work is we categorize specifications applicable to the entire project separately from those applicable to only parts of the project, because that means that we have a high-level description of what is going to happen in the project, and then if there are specific parts of the project that have specific specifications, we specify them in a separate part of the document. And then we hold meetings with customers and technical specialists to review review clarity and completeness of the statement of work and the work breakdown structure. So what you can do in your groups is you can make friends with another group, and you can ask the other group to look at your statement of work and your work breakdown structure before you hand it in to me, so that they can look at the clarity and completeness for you. And of course, in a real working environment, this is where we will call in specialists, where we will call in people that have done similar work before, where we will call in functional managers, and obviously also the client, to look at whether the specifications are clear and the statement of work and the work breakdown structure are clear. So at the end of the day, in this project that you're doing, I'm going to be the customer, and I'm going to be the final I'm going to have the final say of whether what you are saying is clear and complete. Okay, so now we've spoken about mainly the statement of work, although we did touch on the work breakdown structure, because there are some overlaps or similarities in that they must both be clear. and they must both be easily understood, and they must both describe all the work that must be done. But now, how do we break the statement of work, the high-level work that we've described that must be done, down into the work breakdown structure, which tells us exactly what activities we need to do? Okay, so we start with the statement of work and the requirements. And the statement of work and the requirements is the what of the project. So what is the project about? Now, in the work breakdown structure, we ask the how. Right, so when you sit in your groups and you start arguing about what should be in the statement of work and what should be in the work breakdown structure, remember these two questions, the what and the how. So if you're talking about what, it should be in the statement of work, and if you're talking about how, it should be in the work breakdown structure. So then ask, how will the statement of work and the requirements be met? So what is the actual work to be performed to meet the requirements? Then you subdivide the project into small, well-defined work packages. And you use a work breakdown structure or a WBS. So from now on, I'm going to use WBS because it's just quicker and easier to say. Okay, so what is a WBS? Is where we divide the project into well-defined tasks, and the WBS is the most important part of any project plan because it's used as a basis for the schedule, and you'll see this later in this course, for the budget, for the resource requirements, for the responsibility assignments, and for risk management. It also becomes the basis for procurement and communication and all other types of things. But you can see the work breakdown structure is sort of the fundamental spill that the rest of the project turns around. Okay, so here is a example of a work breakdown structure for a house. Now you can see that in this case, we've broken the work breakdown structure for the house down in terms of the different parts of the house. And the beauty of the work breakdown structure is that there is no right way or only way of doing it. So if I set up a work breakdown structure for your career day stall and you set up a work breakdown structure for your career day stall, they will look different. The only thing is, how do we know it's correct? It's correct if both of our work breakdown structures address all the work that needs to be done. Okay, so here you can see we've taken the house and we've said there's the site that we have to do, there's the living unit, there's the garage, and then we've also put overhead and administration or project management as one of the activities that needs, or high-level activities that needs to be done. Then the living unit, you can see this is an American house because they always have a basement. And then the structure, you would have a floor and you would have a roof and you would have walls. And then obviously once you've built the structure, you have the interior. And this would be where you put in the light fittings and the plumbing and all of that type of stuff. So here you can see this work breakdown structure is broken down according to the parts of the house. So how do we break the work down into a work breakdown structure? So we start with a statement of work and requirements, and we ask what are the 5 to 10 high-level activities that will yield the intended results. So what are the 5 to 10 things or deliverables that we need in order to make this project work? Then for each high-level activity we ask what is involved here, what is required. If the questions are difficult to answer, it means that we need to break the activity down further. We then continue breaking down the activities until all the activities of at the bottom of the WBS are well defined. So what do we mean by well defined? We mean that it's explicit what must be done, and that's the first thing. And the second thing is that thing can be done by one person. And another thing is that it's easy to cost. So we know how many hours is it going to take, or how much money is it going to take to do this activity. So when you go through the WBS, you ask the following questions about each work package. Do you need better estimates of duration and cost for the work package? Can you identify who will be responsible for the work package? Is the size of the work package too large to track and control? So it doesn't make sense to define a work package that takes 6 months to complete, because it's very difficult to track and control something that takes 6 months. Because if you ask the person who's responsible for that at the end of 3 months, how far are you? They're going to tell you, no, I'm completely in control and everything is under control. But when you get to 5.5 months, that's when you're going to start picking up, but actually something has gone wrong over here. So now you've already lost 6 months. So it's better to take that activity and break it down into smaller units, so that's easier to track and control. Now, the rule of thumb in project management is that we normally break work packages down to about 80 hours. Now, sometimes we'll have smaller work packages and sometimes we'll have bigger work packages, but that is the rule of thumb. Then, are the activities within the work package independent of each other? Because you don't want activities to be dependent within the work package, because that means that you cannot track it on the schedule, because if you're waiting for me to do something, but in the schedule it doesn't show that you're waiting for me to do something, then it becomes very difficult to track. Do some activities within work packages have different immediate predecessors? And so don't worry too much about this, because we will talk about predecessors and successors when we do time planning. Are risky and non-risky activities combined in the same work package? So what we want to try and do is we want to separate the work so that risky work packages are defined separately from non-risky work packages, because then we know that now we are working on something that is risky and we better track and control it a lot closer. Does the work package contain many different kinds of resources? So if I need a plumber and an electrician and a plasterer to do that one work package, I probably have not broken the work package down to a low enough level. So if we go back to the example of the house over here, if I just stay here and I call this work package execute interior, you will see that now I need a plumber, a plasterer, and a electrician. And probably I should, or not probably, I definitely should break it down further so that there is a specific activity that the plumber does, a specific activity that the electrician does, and a specific activity that the plasterer does. Okay. If the answer is yes to any of the questions, decompose the work package into smaller work packages. If the answer is no to all of them, the work package probably does not need to be subdivided. So when you set up your work breakdown structure for your career day, sit down, do it, and then go back and ask all of these questions. And then you will probably find that some of your work packages have to be broken down to a lower level. Okay, so how do we create a work package? We use the project team. Who then brainstorm. They use their past experience, and we can also use templates. Now, templates are used in specific industries because in order to use a template, what we are doing has to be similar to what we did previously. Okay, so if you go to the PMI website, you will find that they actually have templates of various work breakdown structures that are used in certain industries. Then we can also use multiple teams, and we can also call in experts. So these experts do not necessarily form part of our project team at the end of the day, but they can help us make sure that we haven't missed anything in what we should do in our work breakdown structure. Okay, so there are different approaches that we can use to break down the work. Now, remember, in our house example, what we did was we took the different elements of the house and we broke it down according to that. So in this approach, this is called the end item subsystem approach. So we start with the end item system. So this is the Syscom drives project. Sorry, now it's jumped. Then we subdivide it first into subsystems, then into components, and then into parts. So this is very much what we did with the house example. So you can see we have a planning system, we have a control system, and we have office edition. And planning is then broken down into system engineering, hardware, and software. And obviously each of these will then be broken down a level further. So for example here, material, which is under the control system, has been broken down into controllers and processors. And of course, this is a high level work breakdown structure. How do we know it's a high level work breakdown structure? Because it does not have work packages yet. Because when we have a work package, we have a verb and an object, because we have to do something. Okay, so do something. Build the wall, kick the dog. Sorry, that's a bad example. But design the stall, select the tablecloth, you know. So we need, at the lowest level of the work packages, we will have a verb and an object. Okay, so here is a process step approach. So here we start by defining the phases or stages in the projects, and then we subdivide each into detailed tasks, and we end with the defined deliverables for each. So here you can see is our project life cycle: analysis, design, construct, test, roll out. And design is then broken down further into define user interface, develop technical design, establish quality requirements, develop detailed design. And then develop technical design is then broken down further into define application architecture, define flow, processing flow, design logical database structure, design system interfaces. And at the end of the day, the deliverables of the phase, of the design phase, are then listed here as the deliverables of the phase. Now, in my experience, for the career day, using the project life cycle is the easiest way of breaking down the work and setting up the work breakdown structure. But I'm not going to be prescriptive. You do what works for you. Okay, then we have different formats in which we can present a work breakdown structure. The one is the tree structure. which is the structures that we've been looking at up to now. So that's where we have the blocks, and the blocks are then connected to the work packages that make up those blocks. All right, so maybe just a word in terms of that. As in any discipline, project management has jargon. Now, one of the jargons in project management is that when we look at a work breakdown structure, if there is a block at the top and there are lines that connect to that block, what you are telling me is that by doing these three activities over here, I will have the top activity. All right, and this is very important, and we will do a example in class where I will give you a work breakdown structure and I will ask you to correct it. And that's also one of my favorite questions in tests and exams. All right, then another way in which we can display our work breakdown structure is in an indented structure. So normally we have our system, then our subsystem, the components and parts. So this work breakdown structure that we have at the top here, and take note that that is the same work breakdown structure as is on this page over here, is then at the system level we have the ST system drives and spaces, then we have the planning system, and here is the control system, and then the system engineering, and then the components of that, the materials and the components of that. So you can see that it's basically the same as the tree structure, it's just done in a indented structure. So sometimes the indented structure is easier because it's easier to create, because sometimes it's difficult to create the blocks, and when things change and you have to add another block, it becomes complicated. Okay, then the next thing to understand about a work breakdown structure is that every task or work package has a unique identifier. So in this example, you can see that the top level is called SD, and planning system is then SD1, control system is SD2, office edition is SD3, and then if we go down office edition, you'll see you'll see SD 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6. All right, and you can see that in the not only the lines but also the hierarchy and the numbering is telling me that these elements together make up the office edition. So it's important that when you draw up your work breakdown structure, every work package has a unique identifier, and that there is logic in how you add the identifiers. Right, and the reason we we add the identifiers is not just because you know, as a professor I have nothing better to teach you. No, in practice this helps, because in practice when we do our schedules, our budgets, our responsibility matrix, our change requests, etc., 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 we now don't have to just say system engineering, because you can see it's confusing. Because if I say that there is a change in system engineering on this work breakdown structure, there are two blocks that are called system engineering, but the one is the planning system and the other one is the control system. So if in my schedule I now just talk about system engineering, which one am I talking about? Whereas if I say SD 1.1 system engineering, then everybody on the project knows that I'm talking about the planning system engineering. Okay, so please, whenever you do a work breakdown structure, it has to have a unique identifier for each work package, and you can't just say you can't just start and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and just allocate numbers to each block. because at the end of the day, the way that the numbering is broken down and the hierarchy of the numbering shows you where that work package fits into the work breakdown structure. Okay, so of course your group assignment is to develop a work breakdown structure for your career day stall, but we will start with that in class the next time I see you. And here is some information on work breakdown structures and integrated planning and control and why that is important. And I'm not going to read through this for you because you can all read and you all now have the slides in front of you. So please read through this and make notes about it. And if there's anything you don't understand, then you ask me in class. Right, then the next thing which we normally add to a work breakdown structure is a work breakdown structure dictionary or a WBS dictionary. The reason we do that is because on the work breakdown structure, all we basically have for each work package is a number and a description. And it is normally helpful to have, sorry, now I went too far, to have some more information about that specific work package. So we will say, where does it fit into the statement of work and what requirements is it meeting? It will give a clear definition of the work and all the subtasks. Because remember that a high-level description like design the posters for the career day stall might not be a clear definition. So you might want to add on the work breakdown structure dictionary something like, okay, we're going with the color purple and we're doing medical, so the posters have to address X, Y, and Z. Then later on, when we plan our project further, we will have time estimates and deadlines, cost estimates, responsibility, immediate predecessors, preconditions and inputs, deliverables, resources, and risk assessment. And so what we then do is we go back to each of our work packages, and for each work package, we then write a table that shows us what is the WBS dictionary for that work package. Right, and I thought that I actually had a example of that. Let me quickly just, I obviously saved it in the wrong slideshow. Let me just see if I can quickly find it. Sorry that I'm now not as organized as I should be. PJP 20. No. Okay, let's leave it there. What I will do is in class, when I see you, I will show you what a page out of a WBS dictionary looks like. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. This is then the end of the scope determination of our project. So the scope statement, the work breakdown structure, and the WBS dictionary. And at the end of the day, those three together forms the scope baseline of our project. And remember that there will be questions, multiple choice questions to answer on my tutor on this topic. But because I'm a bit late with this, because I was ill this week, you will have until Friday to complete that.